Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Greg Mannix. I'm with Life Science Nation. I've been working with early stage companies and helping them navigate the platforms that we have to identify investors. I've been doing it for about 3 years now. My background is in medical devices. I've worked in medical devices for more years than I'd like to recognize, but more than 25. And so that's where I come from. Most of my professional career was in Europe and a little bit in Latin America and the United States. And I'll be moderating the panel today. Tales from the Road is a panel about entrepreneurs and fundraising companies and CEOs that tell interesting stories that can be a lesson and hopefully add some value to your overall experience here at Resi. I think it's always interesting to hear about how other people in a similar situation to yourselves have navigated the complicated fundraising process. Every story is unique, but I think we can always learn from others' experiences. So I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel today. And I'll let each introduce themselves, starting with Bill Kohlbrenner.
Thanks, Greg. I'm Bill Kohlbrenner. I'm CEO of a Chicago-based startup called Neurolucent. Our focus is on Alzheimer's disease, but I want to say up front, we're not working on beta amyloid or tau. We're very interested in the upstream events and signals that are dysregulated and lead to the ultimate disease process. It is early stage. A lot of what we're doing is still actually happening in the university, and that we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. But I've come into this role with a fairly diverse background. Most of my career was doing pharmaceutical research at AbbVie. Spent a little time at Pfizer. I've led research groups in antibacterials, antivirals, and also oncology, looking for new technologies, new targets in the cancer space. So ultimately, I moved from the research end of the R&D spectrum into business development. I led a global scouting team. We look for pipeline assets and opportunities, technologies, actually around the globe. 4 years ago, I joined LSN. As Chief Scientific Officer, and this has been very interesting. It's provided actually a unique view of what's going on in the biotech and in funding space, because LSN is actually right at the interface between biotech entrepreneurs, and investors. So we see a lot of the activity out there on the waterfront, the challenges that early stage entrepreneurs have, as well as getting a good perspective on what investors are interested in. And lastly, I actually recently started investing in medtech opportunities. And this, again, this is provided some context for me as I formulate approaches to investors to fund our Neurolucent. You have a good sense of what they're interested in, and it informs your approach to them when you're out fundraising yourself. So, thank you.
We have one Viennese company here today. So Walter Schmidt, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Walter Schmidt. I'm CEO of a company called Arcanis. I consider myself as a serial entrepreneur by accident. I came to Vienna in 1990. 1993, I think. Yeah, early 1993, and before that I got my PhD, so I'm German. I got my PhD at the Max Planck Institute of Experimental Medicine in Göttingen, Germany. I went to the Boehringer Ingelheim think tank, which is called IMP, Institute for Molecular Biology, to the directors group Max Birnstiel, a famous molecular biologist. I had the typical plan to make a postdoc for 2 or 3 years and then get some academic opportunities back in Germany. So then I made at least one experiment in this group of Max Birnstiel, and so there were negative control when positive. Based on that, we decided, okay, that was in 1997. You know, that was a great time for biotech, so the money was, we just had to write and spell a biotech correctly so that the money came in. So we founded a company called Intercell around this, and so we're working on vaccines, And then at some stage, after 5 years, I realized that I sort of more or less got. I was a naive scientist when I started my first company here as a co-founder. So I realized that I got ripped off by my colleagues and co-founders. So I thought this is something I don't really like. So I switched gears and started together with my colleague and friend Frank Magner another company called Aphiris. And so those days, financing was a little bit more difficult, but we got some venture money in 2006. We moved the company forward until 2014. We raised some, let's say, 100 millions of equity and 50 to 60 on license fees from GlaxoSmithKline. Before we were in the Alzheimer's and Parkinson's space. We did some 15 clinical trials, so we are quite experienced here. But then in 2014, the clinical trial, phase 2, failed. Unexpectedly, the placebo group was not a placebo, but was working, so it was disease modifying rather than being inert. So, you know, somebody has to be guilty for that, and of course, those are the co-founders. So, rather than, you know, discussing with the investors, you know, who's right and what's wrong, what has to do, so then we said, okay, do it. And then in 2015, we started Arcanis, knowing that the new substance, the new molecular class for biologics for the next blockbuster should be messenger RNA. So we said, okay, let's go into messenger RNA, and I was working on nucleic acids in Göttingen, so I'm quite familiar with that. And you might not know it, but the mRNA space is very crowded. There are very big players around doing all and everything. So the first idea was, okay, we have to find a slot where nobody is active in, a tissue, and that is the skin. So we are working on skin diseases and skin conditions. Skin conditions meaning, at the end of the day, aesthetic dermatology. And diseases means actinic keratosis and non-melanoma skin cancer. And that's my introduction.
Great, thank you. Cool. Okay, Robert?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. My name is Robert Lauritsen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cerebro, a medical imaging AI software company. So we don't make any RNA or whatever these receivers. We're in it for transforming radiology in the general clinic. But before I'll talk a little more about that, a little of my background. I come from engineering. I've been working with the intersection of life science and IT for 25 years, running large projects at pharmaceutical companies and selling the past decade, selling and delivering services to IT services to pharmaceutical companies. After my first sort of startup back a couple of decades ago was building a mobile device, a dental equipment, you could say a dental clinic that could be in a backpack. Had a great use case. We did have a .com business plan that sort of failed. It was difficult to sell mobile clinics on the internet. But we did actually manage to build a really great product. Just the wrong timing, you can say. The Napster of dental equipment. But I went into pharmaceutical companies, I went into IT services companies and tried some entrepreneurship, building, raising money internally in a company making IT operations and consulting services to provide or build new services was quite a struggle. Did manage so, but I decided to break out and start my own company together with some great people I met at the computer science department of Copenhagen University. So we founded last year a company based out of research in medical imaging and deep learning for the past 8 years, winning competitions with this team in dementia and other spaces across MR and CT, and deciding that we wanted to transform this technology into something that could be used in the general workflow of the clinic, instead of focusing on pharmaceutical clinical trials that have been their historical focus. So last summer we started out with radiologists in India and in Denmark, and have been working on establishing partnerships, in which we have now ready for proof of concept during the spring. That's where we are right now, just sort of raising angel money, you could say mainly through our local network. We'll get back to that. And now looking for moving through the POCs to go into clinical validation in the fall, and hopefully get a product, our first product on the market, that can increase the productivity in the general clinic, both for acute and non-acute diagnostics, and and at a high level of quality. So we're not a diagnostics company per se, but we would like to actually help the radiologist focus their capacity towards the actual tough work of the doctor, removing as much of the more trivial work as possible. That's what we're aiming for.
Thank you. So Ashley Nagel at the end.
So, my name is Ashley Nagel. I'm CEO of a startup company called Seagull Therapeutics, which is based in Strasbourg in France. I think originally I was a chemist, but I really quickly left the lab because it was dangerous for me and dangerous for others for me to be there, and moved into other aspects of drug development, so project management, understanding the marketing, regulatory affairs, and eventually ended up in a company called Fulcrum Pharma, which was quite novel at the time in terms of outsourced drug development, bringing in the expertise to a biotech company that didn't have it, and helping them execute outsourcing and the outsourcing of the development of their product, essentially. It was very interesting, so interesting that it was bought and sold a couple of times, and so I've been on the buy side and the sell side of companies. When that ended, I started the subsidiary of a biotech company that was based out of New York and developing a HSP90 inhibitor in oncology, and I started their subsidiary in Europe using a lot of the different tax credits and non-dilutive funding sources in Europe to help build the company here. And then we merged with another company called OncoSynergy, which was developing an antibody, and because I had a lot of experience in antibodies through time with Lonza Biologics, I was able to create the development plan and the strategy for them around that, and then push that forward again in Europe using as much non-dilutive funding as possible. So that got me quite interested in company creation, company building. I pitched another couple of companies to local investors in the Strasbourg area. But then I joined Domain Therapeutics about 3 years ago. And Domain's a very interesting company. It's at its base a very strong drug discovery company. It was the company that founded the molecule that was licensed into Prexton Therapeutics. Prexton was sold to Lundbeck earlier on last year for nearly $1 billion. It was a molecule in phase 2. And Domain's model is really to do drug discovery, or to take interesting technologies, interesting projects from from universities and to mature them to the point where they can be put into a biotech company. And so then to create the biotech company around them and to attract investors in, attract the team in, and to develop it and put it forward. So Domain currently has Prexon, which has been sold, Mavalon Therapeutics, which is invested by Medici Ventures. We've got a technology company called Peptimimesis, which has had over 2 million invested in it. And a year and a bit ago, we started Seagull Therapeutics, which I'm in charge of and which I'm taking forward. And why I'm here today at Resi in order to find some cash.
Great. That's what we come here for. Thank you very much for the introduction, everybody. That was great. So I think that gives us some good context for discussion about the different and important aspects about fundraising. So one of the questions that comes up a lot, and especially with European companies, is the strategy of remaining local or regional. Basically looking for investors within the country where you happen to be located or near proximity, which seems to be the strategy of nearly all early stage companies. To start local, there's a lot of grant money available in Europe, but in terms of equity funding, there aren't as many possibilities right now in the current market in Europe. So if you guys could comment a bit on how you see the trend going for global versus local in fundraising. So all of you are with European companies except Bill, which is with an American company. So maybe the perspective is a bit different in the US versus Europe. What do you think, Bill?
Well, in the U.S., the fundraising we've done or I've done is it's U.S. based. We're very early stage. My experience with the fundraising has been when investors look at what stage we're at, and they're aware we're working in Alzheimer's. They see a lot of risk there. So getting a seed round of several $1 million to get us to a clinical candidate, that's going to be hard to do. And what I have been doing within the U.S. is look for non-dilutive funding and other funding sources, and not try to get to the big inflection point right away, but use smaller amounts of funding to move it forward. We've been successful in two respects. We have an STTR grant from the National Institute on Aging, which is part of the NIH in the US. And we also have a grant, or it's an investment, from the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation, which is also US based. It's in New York. That not only brings some capital in for us to move forward, but it also, both of those provide important validation for our program, and will hopefully position us when as we move forward and build the program further.
Great. Do you foresee a time when you will talk to investors from Asia or Europe, as well as U.S. investors?
Yes, and I already have some of the angels and seed stage investors were from Europe, and several from China.
Okay.
So we're absolutely open to that.
Great. So Walter, you raised a considerable amount of money with Apheris. Did you have a global approach, or did you mainly do it with European investors?
We did it exclusively with European investors.
Okay.
In those days, as I just said, when in '97 when we started with Intercells, the situation was relatively easy with the money. money was around, and we talked only to two investor groups, T4M and Jeffco, and both of them wanted to invest, so we could decide who to take. For some reason it was T4M.
You could choose.
Later Wellington, I think, moved in, so that was relatively easy. And in, what was it, 2005, I think, the situation was quite tough.
Mhm.
You know, there was the investor scene was dried out. So whenever you had a sort of biotech meeting like this here, everybody was complaining how difficult life is. And then I went to a conference in Frankfurt. It was called Life for You or something. I can't remember. It was in the Frankfurt Stock Exchange building, and the situation was difficult. Then somebody just approached me and said, after my talk, said, "I like what you did. I have a fund, a firm who is looking for biotech investment, so why don't you talk to them?" So then I talked to them. They were located in Munich. They called the MIG funds. So they collect their money from private people. In those days, you could pay in as little as 5,000 euro or something. So they always collected, made funds every year, 50 to 100 million. And we were there 2 days prior to Christmas in Munich. So our CFO, Richard Westmoreland, and myself. So we first went to Wellington. And he said, "Well, I don't know, come back later," something like this. And then we went to this MIG funds who were in a little private apartment, so 2 meters low. We were sitting there, and then this guy, still the fund manager, Michael Motschmann, just looked at us, and he said, "Okay, we will do it." And he said in German, "Wir machen das." And then we went off. And so Rico was still an American. He said, "What does it mean?" And I just told him, "Well, you know, as a German, and this was also German, you know, when Germans say we do it, so then they will do it." And he said, and it definitely worked. Huh?
Wow.
So they really, they had this, you know, this private investor conferences already in January. They invited me to one.
Yeah.
In March we closed the first round, and I think it was quite instrumental for them, you know, traveling around through Austria and Germany and telling private people what a good company I feel this is. So they collected some money, and they told me that, you know, a conference or meeting with Walter Schmidt is, you know, 3 times as effective as without, so I was traveling a lot. So then we made this progress in Alzheimer's disease, so we had a very nice phase 1, of course, uncontrolled, so we had some hints for efficacy. We were very excited about this and a very good friend of the fund manager of MIG funds is Thomas Strüngmann. So he is from the Strüngmann twins, who 10 or 15 years ago sold her generic company Hexar to Novartis. So they were sitting on some 6-8 billion euros, and they got jealous. They also wanted to invest, so this was also a very good, very nice and simple investment, very nice valuation, everything.
Was that a family office or just?
It's a family office. You should have said that.
Family office?
This is a family office, and then also in 2008 we made a very substantial deal with GSK. So time was okay there until, as I said, 2014 when the phase 2 failed. So
Yeah.
we just quit.
Okay, so GSK is an international company. Was that a licensing deal?
That was a licensing. Yeah. It was with GSK vaccines as we were working on.
And do you think this time with Akanis, your current company, do you think you will talk to investors from outside of Europe?
Probably yes. we have a very good advisor, and he's very active in China, so he's talking with Chinese funds. He's always telling us that the Chinese take out their investment from the US and want to shift it to Europe. So there should be money available. Well, I'm always very pragmatic. You know, I'm talking to each and everybody who might be interested, whether it's a financial investor or whether it's a company from the industry who might buy in or buy projects. So it's relatively flexible. And we started Arcanis in 2015, and still there is lots of private money around. You know, the people sit with their money in the bank account, seeing it's melting away rather than getting up. So they are prepared to take personal risk. So if they can do it, so we have our first sort of investment round with family and friends, let's say. And now, as our program really is our lead program in actinic keratosis with interferon alpha, mRNA, we are now looking for somebody who is helping us in financing this first clinical trial here.
Very good. Robert, have you dealt mainly with local investors in your experience?
Well, actually, no.
Okay.
I've been about since we started out with pilot markets in the Nordics and in India. We've also been discussing funding with Indian VCs and innovation funds. The challenge there has been also when I've been discussing with Israeli and with Silicon Valley. Until now, at least, it has been that if they would want to go into investment, we'd have to move our headquarters to their country. So that's been a strange story, but lately actually there's been a development with some of these funds that they've said they've extended their mandate. So as long as we have an interest and want to build a local offset of our business, then they would want to invest. So that's interesting, but that was actually from an Indian innovation fund. That's their all early stage investment into this space. I've heard stories about the Chinese, or we meet them. I haven't met them anywhere. I'm sure they're here somewhere.
There's some here today.
I did actually meet David from this semi-Chinese Asian place. I did have also some discussions with a Malaysian fund, sort of a founders kind of equity setup. But there are some challenges which maybe will be some of the later questions on the cap table that we get back to. So I'm certainly, Denmark is just a tiny country. The currency is the same sort of absolute numbers, it's just the wrong currency when we're talking figures. So since life science is sort of a long-term play, it's a long lead time, 12 to 24 months into a hospital, we can't afford bootstrapping for like 3 years before we're cash positive. So we need real money, and so we have to look abroad. I've discussed this also with some politicians actually in Denmark, so we even created a health tech hub to try to build critical mass to have a voice to discuss this challenge. It's not the perfect environment, but I'm really happy that also having met you guys at this LSN, because it starts making a lot of sense. A lot of the friends and family and angels and these sort of small-time investors, which they are in our local community, they are very eager to learn about AI. They're very eager to learn about life science stuff, but their pockets are not that deep. Mm-hmm. So it's once they start understanding the kind of business we're in and the kind of money we need and the kind of uncertainties around that, that they start backing off.
That's interesting. You know, you have a different perspective being from a small country than probably Ashley being from France, which is a big country, and there's a lot of venture money in France, or Walter in Germany, or Bill in the United States.
Yeah.
So you have to look abroad when you're from a small country.
There's no options not to.
Yeah. How about you, Ashley? So Domain has been successful raising money over the past few years, right?
So, Domain's interesting in that regard from the point of view we've actually raised very, very little money over the past 10 years. The company raised 2 million when it started in 2008. and 2 million for some expansion when it kept going in 2012. But through licensing deals, through collaborative agreements that we've had with people, we've actually brought in over 60, 70 million into the business and use that then to develop our own pipeline and to push it forward. So there's been technology licensing deals, there's been collaborative agreements, licenses around products, things that we've done to help develop our model and to bring cash into the business. Seagull, I mean, just to say, Seagull is an oncology-focused company. So we brought in a mutated protein project that came from the University of Turin that's focused in solid tumors. And the way it works is it helps to normalize the vasculature in the tumor microenvironment in the tumor. It helps to reduce hypoxia, and it changes the immune cell population. So that combination of things allows you to better deliver the standard of care products and the IO products that people are using now, but at the same time takes away the drivers for the tumor to escape. So it's a different way of thinking around how to kill a tumor, but we kill the tumor. What's interesting from the point of view of funding and in France and I think in Europe for me is that yes, there's seed funding around and available, and so there's $1.5 million that's been put into Seagull from Domain, but also from the public banks in France that has allowed us to get started over the past year and develop new data around different efficacy models and things. But to actually take it forward, because it's a protein, you need cell line development, and you need to invest a large chunk of cash to actually push it forward through the CMC and into the preclinic. So yes, there are French investors who we talk to, but also American, as well as other European, German or Dutch or even Danish as well. I mean, there's some quite big funds in Denmark too in terms of biotech. And the UK. But East Coast US definitely as well. I mean, I've talked to some West Coast US funds, but the 9-hour time difference is interesting.
Challenging.
Yeah. 13 hours between here and places in Asia, also challenging, but people are open to it, people are willing to discuss and to see, and we've had some interest from Koreans and others, which has been quite good. So we'll see how we go. I mean, regional, global. For me, it's great to start regional in terms of seed money and getting started. But for me, the model is that we will sell the business after phase 1-2, and to sell it has to be a global sale. I mean, I'm looking for a pharma company to buy. Yep. If I have the validation of 2 or 3 VCs from Europe and the US, then it makes it easier for a pharma company to see. You need good data, but I think having strong investors behind you opens up a network, it opens up contacts that allows you to sell your business afterwards.
It's a kind of validation.
It is a validation. Yeah, absolutely. It's a strong validation.
Yeah, and part of your funding model for Domain has been licensing deals and collaboration agreements and things like that. Did you look outside of France for those deals?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Pharma.
Yeah.
So pharma's global. So we talk to pharma companies in Europe, in the US. I mean, in the past 2 years, we've done a big deal in Europe, and 2 big deals in Europe and 2 big deals in the US. Mm-hmm. So with Bristol Myers, with Alkermes, with Merck in Germany, and with BI.
Yeah.
Can I, Ashley, you mentioned early on about picking a technology up from a university. What are the mechanics of that? In other words, when you find something you're interested in, do you already have the funding to build a company around the technology and you pull it out of the university, or do you stay plugged into the university for an interim period?
I mean, it's a very interesting question. So it depends, because different countries have different rules around their universities and their and their IP and things. So within France, Domain has signed 5 agreements. So in France recently they privatized, you could say, the tech transfer offices within regions and universities. They're called SATs, and effectively they regroup maybe universities in the region. They handle all of the contracts associated with MTAs or licenses or everything else. And so as a source of products for us, the SATs are great because it means that we can plug into a pipeline. And so we signed agreements with them defining kind of licensing terms in a framework agreement, not the numbers, not the durations or anything, but the main terms have been signed or agreed. And it gives us the ability to look at their pipelines. What it also does is it allows us to work with them to define maybe the killer experiments, that's one way of looking at it, or the maturing experiments, which help take a technology that's in some professor's lab, but mature to a state where we can see that it can come into our business, and that then we can mature it further to take it into a company. And what's good about France is that the SATs actually have cash to mature different projects, so that's quite good. So yes, we stay linked from that point of view. With Seagull, it was different. Seagull, Italy has what they call a professor privilege law, which means that professors actually, if they pay for their own IP, get to keep it all. And so we were able to create the business with the professors and assign the IP in. And so yes, we maintain links with the university because we want to continue to use the expertise in the labs and things.
Right.
But it's a different, so that's what I say, so it depends on how the IP is handled within different places and what you can do.
Okay, interesting. So changing subjects, there's an issue that comes up a lot when I'm talking to fundraising companies, and that is their expectations about how long it takes to raise money. Almost everyone I talk to is overly optimistic, and they think, 3 months to 6 months probably. Or someone will tell me, I'm looking to raise $5 million, but I need it by the end of this summer. And I'd like to hear your opinion on whether you think those expectations are realistic or what your experience has been. So, from the time you meet with an investor initially to going through further conversations and then due diligence and then eventually get a term sheet, what timing do you think is a reasonable expectation for an early stage company? What would you say?
Well, I think the lag that we've seen, given the stage we're at, the lag we've seen is not so much putting the contract together or the term sheet. It's finding the right fit with an investor that would be willing to provide the capital for us to move the program forward. And that's why we've opted more for the non-dilutive funding and other sorts of smaller bites of cash to move the program forward. To your question, I think a year to at a later stage, I would anticipate it's going to be 9 months to a year to find an investor, and then doing the deal, so to speak, would be a number of months after that, maybe 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Walter, what has your experience been with equity funding?
Well, the experience, it's depending on the time period where we are. So my experience is, that the expectation from investors, but also from the industry, change all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, after school I was so crazy I thought I should study agriculture. So I said I have to make a practicum on a farm, so that's what I did. And so what my farmer did as any other. So in the morning they just looked out of the window, said, oh okay, Carl is doing something, I don't know, in the water, so to the feel, okay, let's do this. And for the industry and for the investors, my impression is also, you know, is if somebody is doing an initiative somewhere, so then all the others follow, or many of them follow. So this is also something in my mRNA space. You know, Moderna was very good in raising money, and so these guys got just one investor, and then all the others followed. So this is something in my experience.
Has that helped you? Has the Moderna experience, has that helped you in your project?
I have to find out, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm not that far yet. What else would, in the 90s it was relatively easy to get money after the crash in 2000, so it was relatively difficult, and it's always individual, you know. As I said, it's changing, and you have to be present all the time and online, so to say. And if you talk to these guys, you can't. There's no expectation that you can have. You just have to have this meeting and see. So who's sitting there? What is the expectation? How do they do this? So I'm not. When I present the company to this in meetings like here, you know, I don't do it I do it not high tech. I do it low tech. You know, I have the company presentation printed out, and you know, some people want to go through all of these slides, so the other just ask immediately something which is on slide number 20. So you just jump there. I want to say, so it's very individual. It's changing all the time, and that's what my experience is. What you have to expect when you get somebody on the other side of the table.
So today you meet with an investor for the first time. How long do you think the process might take? It's hard to say because it's, you know, every period is different. You're right.
Yeah, every period is different, and I can't make a prediction. It's really depending on the appetite. It's really, it seems that for our projects in the skin, so there's really some upcoming interest from derma companies, so we'll talk to those as well. See, what they say is, you know, in aesthetic dermatology or dermatology, there's nothing new since in the last 20 years. We're all doing the old stuff, you know, and so we have some sort of innovation here that we can offer. These companies also did some innovation center. They I can't remember the word. So these derma companies now realize that innovation has to come from outside rather than inside.
Yeah.
This is another example how these things might work.
Okay. And Robert, I think that digital health is a whole different type of investment market. I don't think.
Seems like it.
Yeah. There's a lot of interest in digital health now, and it seems that the timing is shorter, but I might be mistaken. But I think compared to like a drug company like Acanis or Neurolucent, the digital health market seems to be moving faster. Is that your impression?
Well, I show me the investor that's putting money in it, then I'll tell you. So I think I've been pretty much talking to investors nearly on a weekly basis since we founded the company. A lot of them have been angels, but also VCs around the world. Some returning calls, you know, follow up just to figure out where we are in the phase to match that profile. I think being here at Resi is sort of the onset of a new approach, which is a lot more focused, which really helps out because it's not that easy to find. There are not that many friends and families around the world that has a lot of contacts. But I'm not really sure it's that much faster. It took like 6 months to go from the initial discussions to closing the first sort of seed round after we were founded. And I'm pretty sure it's going to take pretty much all the first half of this year to go through and kind of close the current round that we're closing in hopefully a couple 2 to 3 months. And I'm certainly expecting at least 6 to 9 months for raising sort of the real round to bring us to cash positive in 2022. So I think I'm not really sure it's that dissimilar from biotech, although that I do realize also from listening to the previous panel on medical devices that we're sort of in this in between the two nails, right? We're digital, so we should be having a SaaS model, and we should be sort of completely up and running in 3 years, and maybe we are if we're getting funded, but it still takes up to 2 years to get into a hospital. Right? So the customers are not that flexible in acquiring and implementing this kind of technology. So we have to cater to the slowness of life science with the anticipation and the excitement of digital, but those two worlds just don't fit. So
Yeah.
I'm being sort of moderately conservative, but also realize that we have to get very fast to market with the product, which is
Yeah.
why we have sort of a fully co-creation partner approach with the hospitals, because we can't go into a 12-month tender process or something else. We have to have them being able to buy what we give them more or less when we're done developing it.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, a drug can take 10 to 12 years
Yeah.
in the whole process.
Yeah.
And digital health is faster, but
Yeah.
it's still not easy and fast to get an investment into a
Mm.
company. It's a lot of work.
No, I'm talking to market analysts like Simon Harris from Signify Research. He also says that now this space that I'm in, medical device or medical imaging and in AI, the initial investors that have put a lot of money into it, there are like 4 companies in the world that have 50+ million US in investment. And they're getting anxious to see some sort of return at some point in the near horizon of the next 3 to 4 years, because an 8-year chip on the table is pretty long for most of these companies, so they're getting a little anxious. And none of these companies that have truckloads of money literally in their bank account seem to have, really a product yet. They're just making nice tech. So we're insanely focused on making something that will actually work out and provide value, and not necessarily make it super sexy. Just to prove that this can be a business.
Yeah.
We don't need that much money, just 5 maybe in the US. So.
Have you started, just curious, have you started pre-selling to some hospitals, and as a way of maybe getting some pilot or?
Yeah, exactly. So we're actually collaborating with hospitals in Denmark and Norway and in India, and collaborating to the sense that we have a collaboration agreement. We're doing POCs. We're going to be doing clinical validation at the hospitals. They're very eager to work with us. We just had last week, actually, we collected radiologists and neuroradiologists at a workshop in Copenhagen from Norway, Denmark, and India. And they showed up, like 10 people, very, very hard to get access to help us innovate and discuss clinical validation, discuss the user experience, discuss how we can improve workflow with this kind of technology. Because for us, the AI is really just, it's like electricity in the wall. It's the applications that are really interesting, right? And we're looking at the acute and non-acute workflow in the general clinic.
Selling software to hospitals.
We're selling software to hospitals, right? And we have to solve real problems that they have,
Yeah.
right? And they are the best who tell us. So that's our approach, and they're good to go. But that's our entire strategy from day one, was to engage with the hospitals. Even before we had an office, we had a workshop with radiologists. So it's the only way to go. It has to be demand-driven from the hospitals. We're talking to chief radiologists in India and in the Nordics.
Ashley, in your experience, like a venture investment from a VC, how long has that taken?
I mean, from my experience, it's, from people who I've worked with, from raises that we've done for some of the spin-off companies, you're talking a year, you're talking 12 months. From your initial discussion.
Those are people you already know.
These are people you know.
What about people you've met for the first time?
I think then it depends on the topic and the phase of their funds and the climate and everything else. There's a lot of factors that go in there, but we're talking at least 12 months.
Yeah.
I think that, I was in listening to the oncology venture panel, as you'd expect, earlier on today, and one of the panelists said, it's 1% of what I see is what I invest in. So and he's a specialist oncology fund. So if every fund is doing the same, then this is why it takes so long.
Then you better talk to 100 different potential investors,
Yeah.
right? To find
At
that
least,
one.
at least,
At least.
and I mean that's only for your first ticket. If you need a syndicate of like 3 or 4 investors to make the amount, then you're talking like 400 or 500, and hopefully you can reduce that because that one who you have as the lead knows some people who like working with them.
Great. So we've actually we're almost running out of time. I wanted to open the floor up to questions. Any comments or questions? There's been some good stories. Maybe we could just end it by if each of you could tell us a quick story about a difficulty you've encountered fundraising, an obstacle, something that might shed some light if you can think of anything. Does anyone have an idea? Robert?
So the traditional cap table discussion.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think part of our cap table are professors at the Copenhagen University. So they're really a critical bridge into research, into to the feed of IP pipeline, into the products, into sort of novel stuff that we can do and bring into action. But they're not then dedicated full-timers at the company.
Right.
So
But they have equity.
But they have equity,
Right.
and then substantial equity. Right?
Uh-huh.
So we're basically a co-founder-based company, 85% co-founder owned. But eventually, there will be a discussion on that. And some of the feedback has been from some of the investors have been, you gotta have just the main founders, co-founders be full-time, fully dedicated for the company. Right? So when you have these hang-arounds, so to speak, they're still working tirelessly at making things work out, but they also have another vocation, then that could be a challenge.
Okay.
I would say that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
That's one of, I don't know how much time we have, but that's what we're working through right now. A lot of what we do is still happening at the university. Co-founders are university-based. And as you point out, there are several other priorities that they need to address. So what I've done, one thing in particular was small molecule drug discovery program. You need a really good assay. We're working on calcium channels. And I ultimately just went out and I'm doing a deal with an outside, I'm outsourcing that particular need, and hopefully that will accelerate the program. But depending on the circumstances, you have to look for solutions, variety of different places, and not just at the university.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I think it's great that we pull technologies out of universities, and it's great that we mature them and things like that, but we have to have outside validation work done at a CRO
Yep.
to show
Yes.
that it's not just the professor's secret sauce.
Yep.
That's absolutely key.
Okay. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much, panelists, for being here and sharing your experiences.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.